Hello, in this video we're going to go through a quick UI walkthrough to get you familiar with the Imagine App Creator version 2 interface and the location of all the key tools and components. The first step is you're going to want to go ahead and log in with your credentials. When you first logged in, you'll be greeted with this screen to go ahead and create a new app. Now, if you have already opened the Imagine App Creator platform and having to create the new app button, you'll be presented with a screen that will show your existing applications. To get to this screen, all you need to do is down on the bottom bar is click New App, and then you'll see this screen as well. So here we can see a number of items listed. We have a lot of pre-built sort of templates to get you started, so you're not starting from scratch. At the bottom, you'll see New Blank App. That's completely blank. There's no assets there, and you'll be creating everything from scratch. For the UI walkthrough, we're just going to go ahead and select one of these pre-built templates. I'm going to select the hotel and click Create. Now you're going to be prompted to give your app a new name. I'm just going to call mine My Hotel and click Create. Okay, so once your app's created and all the assets are loaded, you should be presented with this screen. Now we'll notice a few key areas here. First, right in the center, we can actually see a little preview of the app. This is a what you see, what you get editor, so you can essentially drag and drop components on screen, click items on screen and interact with them, control their properties and their settings. We can see here that this is essentially a splash page that's made up of a few components. We have a text box that's placed here. We can actually click that and just go ahead and move that around. We have an image, which is the logo located here. We can go ahead and move that around as well. And we have a rectangle shape as well. That's actually being used as an overlay on top of the background image. You can see it makes it a little dimmer. Move that as well. And then lastly, we have the background image of the hotel. And so all these items are fully interactable. We can position and move them around how we like. And like I said, it's a what you see, what you get editor. So how you actually position it on screen is how it will look when you build your application. So I'm going to go ahead and just put those all back to where they were. Below in the bottom here, we can see a series of pages. This is each page that makes up the app. If you go ahead and just click it, it'll transition to the next page in that application. So we can see we have a landing page, a home page, a booking page, service request page, a review page, contact us, a page to go ahead and look at the rooms. This is scrollable, so if you just go ahead, you should be able to scroll right in here. We have some pages on the individual rooms themselves, a page for the spa, we have a page for the bar, a restaurant, a salon, the indoor pool, and lastly, we have a loyalty page here which uses QR codes that you can scan to unlock rewards. This is particularly useful if you want to offer a loyalty program and where, say in this example, they stay 6 nights, they get a night free. On the bottom, we have these little arrows. You can use this to scroll to the additional pages. So if the number of pages you have extend beyond this view, you can navigate through those. You'll also notice a little plus circle here and a little 2-page button here. The first one adds a new page, a new completely blank page. So you can see there's no items on here. The second one is a copy. So I can actually pick a page, and if I click that, it'll make a copy of that page and add it right next to the one that I copied. Now this is particularly useful if you're going to make another page and a lot of the elements on that page are going to be similar to the page you're copying, and you just want to be able to change a few things. It allows you to just copy it, make the few changes you want to make without having to recreate everything from scratch. Now above the pages, we have a few things going on here. First, you'll notice the double down arrows. This actually minimizes the page navigation and just puts the toolbar at the bottom. You can click it again, it'll raise it up. We'll also notice a Masters tab, a Foregrounds tab, and a Dialogues tab. We're going to get into those in just a second. To the right of that, you'll see here it says iPhone 6.7. This controls what device you're previewing your app on. So if you click this arrow, you'll get a whole list of different device selections from iPads to iPhones, Galaxies, Nexus. For desktop apps, you'll see Surface and you'll see various resolution monitors. Same thing for Mac, we have iMac. So we can just go ahead and select a device we want to preview on. I personally like to just preview on the iPhone 6.7 Plus. Now you notice the app as I transition looks exactly the same, and that's generally what you want. We're automatically going to rescale to the resolution that your device is running in. But this is a good way if you have a particular device you're targeting or you want to verify that on a certain device everything's going to resize properly, you can quickly transition to those devices. Let's just go ahead for a second. We can select a desktop. I'm going to pick a 27-inch screen, and you can see that it gets much bigger, so I have to zoom out a little bit. Now it's still in this portrait mode, so this would assume that you're turning the monitor sideways because this particular application is actually locked to be portrait. I'm going to show you how to unlock that in a second. So let's just go ahead and we'll switch this back to a mobile device. Moving to the right, you'll actually see your zoom percentage, so we can see 100%, 75%. To the right of that, the three devices next to each other. This is your 3-device quick preview. If you click this, it'll actually show you across 3 different form factors what this app is going to look like. Just lets you quickly look that everything is actually staying in proportions for how you want all of the objects within your application to align. To the right of that, what's grayed out here is this little phone rotation button, and this allows you to change your preview mode from portrait to landscape. Now this particular application is actually locked to portrait mode. It doesn't support a landscape mode, and that's something you have control over. So you can set your application to support rotation, so you can run it both portrait and landscape. You can set your application to be locked to landscape only, so it only runs in landscape mode, and you can set it to be in only portrait mode like this particular application. In a second, I'll go ahead and show you how you can change that. To the right of that, you have this little play button. So right now we're in edit mode, so this is an edit preview because we can interact with everything on the screen. The play button actually allows you to run it as if you were on your device. So I'm going to go back to the landing page here and just go ahead and click the play button. You can see we have this nice little animation here, and then it fades to the main page. We have some nice cool scrolling graphics. If we click the button in the top left, we get this nice little menu so we can navigate to different areas within the application. So I'm going to go ahead and just click Rooms, and I can scroll to the rooms. I can actually click on a room and see details about that specific room. I can click the Book Now button and actually fill out a quick form to request a reservation. I have a back arrow at the bottom so I can navigate back. So you get the idea. This just allows you to interact with your application as you would on the actual device. So we're going to go ahead and just click the Stop button, which brings us back into edit mode. To the right of the play button, we have the little disk icon here that actually saves. So if you click that, you'll notice on the top, first it says saves locally. That's a local copy. In a moment, you'll see your app has been saved to the cloud. So what that means is you can go to another device, launch the editor, log in with your credentials. You'll be able to see your application that you created on a different system. You'll be able to open it, it will download those assets and allow you to work on it from multiple devices. The next button to the right looks like a little cloud with an arrow. This is your Publish button. So this is how you can publish your application. There's a number of different ways to publish. You can publish to something called Imagine Preview. And Imagine Preview is an application you can load on your mobile devices or your desktop, and it'll allow you to actually publish your app right into that preview application without having to go through a marketplace or an application store. It's very useful, especially for testing, proof of concept, your initial development stage where you may want to get feedback. Because you can load Imagine Preview on as many devices as you'd like. These can be devices that people are testing or just previewing your app for you, but you didn't have to go through the whole application submission process, so you can quickly test apps out in the field. To the right of Imagine Preview are published to app stores. This is your traditional app store. It's the Apple App Store. It's the Google Play Store. So that's your most commonly known way to get applications to an end user's device. To the right of that, you're published to Imagine Portal. Imagine Portal is primarily targeted at enterprise environments and allows an enterprise to create a self-branded portal where all that needs to be installed on an end user's device is the portal software itself. And then every application that enterprise creates, they can actually just publish to Portal, and that gets pushed out to the users within their organization. And then lastly, you can publish to raw app files. And all that does is basically take your application and generates the APK and the IPA files. And those are the two files, one for Android, one for Apple. And then you can take those files and do what you like, whether that's publish in a traditional app store or manually inject them into end user devices. So just go ahead and hit the cancel button to close that out. And then lastly, this little button on the right brings up a console. And this console actually gives you some feedback. It's very useful if you get into creating your own custom actions and your own custom controls through JavaScript. Anything we don't do natively within the application, you can actually write your own JavaScript code to go ahead and do that. Those can be just logic sort of processes that run as actions, or those can be full UI components that you can drag and drop on screen that you've custom made. Now, any sort of errors or anything within your JavaScript code, we can actually output to this console here to give you feedback as to what's going on. So this is very useful for debugging purposes. Now, circling back to these tabs that we talked about just a moment ago, we see Pages, Masters, Foregrounds, and Dialogues. We'll go ahead and check out the Masters tab first. Masters allow you to create a predefined look for how something should be presented, but the underlying information within there may change. Now in this use case, this master just simply has an image. So this particular master was used on just one page within this application, the actual home page. So if we go back to Pages, click Home Page, you can see this nice scrolling feed of different images showcasing different parts of the hotel. And if we look on the left, we can see it's an animated feed, and we can see that it was using a master called Master. And what Master can do, in this case for an image, I can define the size and shape and location of an image, but then I can actually swap what image is actually in there. So it's a way to define a look and feel, but have the underlying information, in this case an image, change, but still conform to that design that I created. The next tab we have is a Foregrounds tab. So when we click the Foregrounds tab, you see you have just one foreground for this particular application. And foregrounds show up on top of all other content in the page. So they're very useful for creating navigation bars on either the top or the bottom. If we go to Pages and pick one of our pages, we can see in the properties under Foreground Overlay we have this foreground selected. What's great about foregrounds is you only have to design a foreground once, and then you can apply it to as many pages as you like. You can have multiple foregrounds, so if you have different pages that require a different foreground, you can do that. The next tab is the Dialogues tab, and dialogues are overlays that can pop up on top of your page. We have a few dialogues that we include by default. We have a global pop-up, which is just useful for pop-up messages that will show on top of your page, a default loading screen, 2 combo boxes, the default view for when you activate the device's camera, and a code scanner view, and this is when you're scanning a QR code or a barcode. And then obviously you can create your own dialogues as well. Okay, we're just going to go ahead and go back to Pages now. Now to the left, over here, we have a couple things going on. At the top we have a tree view that is showing all the components within the particular page that we have selected. So if you just go ahead and navigate through different pages, you'll see that those items change. So for example, on the landing page, we just have a text, we have an image for the logo, we have a rectangle, and we have a background image. Whereas if we go to the home page, we have a few more things going on here. We have a few more text, we have a button, some images, we have what's called an animated feed, which is what's making these images scroll across the screen, and then we have background. Now all of these items are selectable. You can select them either from your tree view here, or you can select them actually on the edit preview. So if I go ahead and select the stars, you'll see the stars highlight. If I select, see that the text for price highlights. Now next to each item, you'll notice you have a little trash barrel and a little eyeball. Trash barrel actually just deletes a particular item, and the eyeball makes it not visible. Now it's important to point out that if you publish an app with the eyeball not present, you will not see that in the published app. It completely hides it from the application. So this can be useful if you have a lot of different layers within your application and you're just trying to hide something so that you can access or see something else that you're working on, but just always remember to go ahead and turn that eyeball back on so that it's actually visible in your end product. Now you also notice that some of these items have little lightning bolts next to them, and that means there are actions associated with that particular item. And we'll get into actions in just a second. Now if you've ever used any graphics program such as Photoshop or something like that, you'll know that those often use the concept of layers. Same thing with if you use PowerPoint, you have send to front, bring to front, send to back, etc. That same concept exists here. So layers work from the top down. So obviously the background is the bottommost layer. You can move layers around by simply clicking these little arrows that you see here. You can move a layer up and down. And so we'll notice with this one, if we keep moving it down and eventually move it behind the background, it actually disappears. So you no longer see per night there. So we're going to go ahead and move that to the top. Now you also have a keyboard shortcuts that you can use to just go ahead and move this layer around. And to do that, if you go to Modify, Arrange, you'll see the keyboard shortcuts there. So all I was using was, because I'm on Mac, was Command bracket. Now if you are someone that uses Illustrator, you'll be familiar with these shortcuts because they're the exact same shortcuts that are used for Illustrator. You'll also notice as you select an item, things change down here. We have what's called the Properties Inspector. And so the Properties Inspector allow you to control all the properties for that particular item that you have selected. So here we have a text item, and some of the properties we have for text are the position of this particular component within the application. If we move this around, you'll actually notice that these percentages change. So let's move it all the way to the left. You'll notice all those numbers change. You can actually click on these numbers and you'll notice they'll change from percentages to millimeters. My recommendation is to leave everything in percentages so that it scales properly as you change devices. But if you want to work in millimeters, you can do that as well. Below that we have the appearance for this text, so we can actually change the text that's in here. We can control how it resizes. We can set it to multi-line. We can set ellipsis, center it vertically, your line spacing. You can control your text style. Right now we don't have any base style. I'm going to get into styles in just a minute. What's the font size going to be? So we can go ahead and just increase our font size, drag our box out so we can fit it. So if you want to make something bigger, you can control your font color. You can control the opacity. You can control your font. And your alignment. Now, the options that you see within the Properties Inspector actually change depending on what item you have selected, because different item types have different properties. So for example, if we click this image here, the stars, we'll notice that it's a completely different set of properties. Instead we have the path to our image here, which will actually show us where we can pick an image. We have alignment and opacity. You notice there's an Actions tab. And almost every element or almost every item that you can add to a page has some sort of action. Usually by default, at a minimum, it has an on-press event, and some have more. So for example, if I click this button here, which is the Book Now button, we'll notice that it has a few more actions. It has on press, it has on down, and it has on up. And different components will have a different array of event triggers that will be listed under actions. So we're going to go ahead, we're just going to pick the stars for now. If you hit the little plus sign next to the on press event, that'll open the action selector. And these are all predefined actions that have already been coded for you. You don't need to do any coding to make these actions happen. And so we have everything from dial a phone number, open a map, reset your page, send an email, set visibility of one of the components that's on screen, set the text in the text box, show a pop-up. For navigation, this is very common to control navigation with buttons on your app. Navigate back, navigate to certain pages, layout, appearance, you can control animations, play an animation, stop an animation, form controls, media controls, play a full screen video, play a sound, play a video, stop all sound, stop a video, IoT controls, so you can connect to Bluetooth devices, for example. Add in plugins, so we have Google Analytics integration, so if you want to hook this into your Google Analytics, you can. If you click the All button, you'll actually see all of the actions that are available. So all of the ones that are here have already been pre-coded for you. All you need to do is add them into your application. In the top right, you have a little search bar up here that can be used to filter down the results. So if you know what you want, you don't remember exactly which tab it's in, or don't want to scroll through all the options, you can just start typing. So for example, dial number, and boom, I got a dial a number. Show pop-up, show pop-up. So for example, we're just going to go ahead, we'll insert that. And now this has an option, which is obviously the message to show hello. And now when I press these stars, it'll show the hello box. We'll hit the play button just to preview this, and there you go, you see the hello. And you'll notice that this is using that default dialog that we created for you that you saw under dialogues. Will pop up. At the top, you may have noticed this plus sign. This is how you get components on the actual application. So if you actually go ahead and click this, you'll see the component selector screen. And there's a number of components in here. And all these components have essentially been pre-coded for you. You don't have to do any coding whatsoever to get these components to work within your application. So it's everything from 3D models, animations, buttons, texts, toggle buttons, images, rectangles, image 9 slices, navigation like image carousels, glass shelves, drop-down menus, hamburger menus, toolbars, animated feed lists, feed item views, feed lists, product lists. We've done a lot here to create a lot of components out of the box for you so that you don't have to go and create them on your own. Dynamic forms, text entries. If you click the All button, you can actually see all of the components that are available for you. Again, you can also use the search box in the top right to filter this down and get your component. Now any component you click on, you'll get a little description here that will explain what the component is and what you can do with it. Now in the top bar here, the file menu, there's a lot of interesting things here. Obviously your basic controls of creating a new application, opening or saving an existing application are there. You also will notice Open Cloud Services, Open Cloud Files, and Open Resources folder. We're going to go ahead and open Cloud Services, which will open your default browser. And here we can see the dashboard for your application. And Cloud Services offers a number of things. It has a built-in CMS system to deliver content to your application. So you can use this to create feeds, articles, forms, quizzes, e-commerce. If you're trying to sell products within here, you can create product lists. You can also do push notifications in here. You have cloud files, so you can actually upload files to the cloud that will be used within your application. The main advantage to this CMS system, to these cloud services, is that it allows you to make your content dynamic. If you bake in all your content, whether it's the text, whether it's the images, into the application itself, that's perfectly fine. But once you publish it, that's how the content is. If you want to change the content, you're going to have to republish your application. If you use a CMS system like the one we provide, and you can use your own CMS as well if you have one, you can make that content dynamic. So now instead of having to republish your application, you can simply change the content within the CMS system, and that'll automatically be picked up by your application. Another really important item in here is the Open Resources folder. This opens the resources folder for your application. And this is really important because this contains all the resources that drive your application. So you'll notice a number of different directories here. Animation, audio. So if you have audio files, you put them in the audio directory. If you have animations, you can put them in the animation directory. Fonts can go in the fonts directory. Images can go in the images directory, etc. You'll also notice a scripts directory. This is where you can place any custom scripts that you write, whether that's to add custom actions that we don't have by default or to add custom UI components that we don't have by default. You can simply place your custom scripts within this directory and they'll show up and be available to your application. Now the fonts one is also important. By default we provide a number of fonts, but if there's a particular font you want to use, just copy and paste it in here. We don't include every font within your system by default because fonts get packaged into your end application and the size of the fonts can add up quickly and make your application size much bigger than it needs to be. So if there is a certain font you want to use, simply drop it in there and they'll be available to you in the drop down for fonts for things that require fonts, such as a text box. Another useful thing in here is application settings. So these have a couple of global settings. One, you can change your application name. Two, you can control your application orientation. So if you recall earlier, I said how this application was locked to portrait. Here you can change that. I can lock it to landscape, and I can also make it so that it supports rotation. So as an example, let's just go ahead and let's make it support rotation and save that. Now you'll notice over here, once that saves, that the rotation button is now enabled. So we can go ahead and rotate this application. If we go back to app settings, you notice we have the default page color. So that's when we create a new page. What is this default color going to be? We can change that. So for example, let's just go ahead and make it red. And now our default background page color will be red. You can also control timeout. So let's say you have an application you're making that requires authentication, where you have to log in, for example, like a banking app or something like that. You can actually set an inactivity timeout, and after a certain amount of inactivity, you can tell it to go ahead and revert back to a page. So if this was for authentication, you might have it force the app to go back to the login page. And you can also control a transition for that. So when it goes to that page, what should the transition be? Slide, fade, etc. And then lastly, at the bottom, you'll notice guest members. This allows you to share your application with someone else by email address. So you simply put their email in here. They'll be sent an invitation where they can join your application. When they launch the Imagine App Creator, that will show as an available app to them that they can edit. And so now you can share your application while you're still working on it with multiple people. We also have under app settings the styles. And the styles allow you to create predefined styles. So you can see we just have the default here. But let's go ahead and we create a new style. And I'm going to call my new style Dave's style. And with this, I can set what I want my default font size to be, what I want my default font color to be. Maybe I want transparency, and what do I want my default font? My default alignment, maybe center. Great. So now I created this new default style. And this is very useful because if I close this, and let's say I add a new text box, currently the default color is white, so I actually won't see it over the white. If I drag it up here, I can see it. But it's just going to use some system default font sizes and colors. But I can go to the properties now, and instead of having to set the font size, set the color, etc., I can actually just click my base style here and select Dave Style. Now the last thing we're going to show is on the right. You may have noticed this little box, this little gray box, the plus sign, and this is for guide wires. So if you actually click it and just drag it, you can actually create guide wires, which are just very useful for aligning different objects. So I can just keep creating it. I can drag down, or I can drag across to go ahead and create those guide wires. So that's a quick UI walkthrough of the Imagine App Creator. In the next video, we'll show you how to build your very first application.